And we're live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. So excited to be joined by Tom McCluskey again, filling in. Just imagine in your mind like a really sad violin and think of Josh in a hotel room, cramped, and he's
With all
making a
his
long
children.
trip back to Michigan with all of his children. He's doing okay. I got an update on him. I will say we might just do a solo Josh episode on Friday because he's probably got 2 episodes now worth of thoughts and takes to get off his chest. But Tom, thank you for last minute filling in again. It's gonna be great.
I'm always humbled to fill in for Josh as he tackles the wilderness of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The strong man that he is.
But we have so much to talk about today. Erica, what will we be getting into on today's episode?
There is so much to talk about. We have a lot of updates. Obviously, the election in Wisconsin and the special election down in Florida from yesterday. More updates. There is also an exclusive report that was grabbed by the NYPost from the Department of Homeland Security, all things immigration, deportation. We have wins. We have wins for babies. Planned Parenthood is losing funding. We'll talk about what that means. How the Trump administration is going about that, and also these slashes at under Bobby Kennedy with HHS and how those are actually really good for babies as well. We have an update on Kansas with what went down, the Black Mass protests last Friday, and this is my favorite part. You knew the boys weren't reading. Kids can't read whole books, especially the young men, but it's actually a lot worse than you thought, and we're going to dig into that and also what to do about it. It's going to be a great day.
And before we get into that, what warm welcome to everyone in the chat today. Thank you for joining. We do this 11 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube. So if you want to go over and subscribe and join them, but warm welcome to everyone in the chat, and a special thank you to Charity Mobile, pro-life phone company. When you switch to Charity Mobile, 5% of your monthly plan goes to the pro-life, pro-family charity of your choice at no extra cost to you. It's everyday living made effortless giving. It's time to make the switch. With the same nationwide coverage as the major carriers, Charity Mobile has a variety of plans to fit every need, from basic talk and text options to unlimited data. And you can get up to 8 lines. They offer a range of phones from simple flip phones to the latest 5G smartphones, or you can bring your own compatible device. Plus, no contracts, no termination fees, and a 30-day guarantee, so there's no risk in giving them a try. Charity Mobile has been in business for nearly 30 years, providing the live US-based customer service by phone, chat, or email. So why not buy the way you believe and support causes that matter to you with your everyday phone use? New customers can get a free phone and instant credit, plus free activation and free standard shipping with the promo code LOOPcast. Big thank you to Charity Mobile for making this possible and sponsoring the podcast. Thank you to Charity Mobile. So, Tom, your prediction came true. If we look at these Wisconsin results, humbling would be one way of putting it. Judge Susan Crawford has won this high-stakes, high-spending election over Wisconsin's Supreme Court. According to the official call, this was Decision Desk called it late Tuesday evening. When all was said and done, Susan Crawford beat Judge Brad Smeal by about 55% to 45%. I'm not sure in which it ended up happening, where it ended up landing on that. But yes, a sound defeat. The reason this is relevant is we had an exceptionally high turnout for this race. 2.4 million votes compared to the 1.8 million in the 2023 Supreme Court race. So yes, people came out for this.
High turnout.
The way that Democrats are framing this is a rebuke of the billionaires, of Musk, of Trump. We're not happy with what's going on in the country. I doubt I would not follow the same conclusion. This was an uphill race from the beginning. And so we're looking at a spending difference. The records was set in spending. It was over $100 million was spent at the end of the day. Democrats did end up outspending Republicans, but this spending was still dominated by Democrats, even though Elon Musk himself donated $25 million. So we're looking at 40 to 65 million estimates for Democrats and 33 to 50 million, and 25 of that straight from Elon Musk. But hilarious, this referendum on billionaires we're talking about, George Soros and Pritzker was involved on the Democrat side. So it's not like there was just one billionaire involved. There was plenty. So that was what ended up happening. And we talked about this a little bit, but Erica, do you have some of the consequences of this election?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. And we, like I said, we previewed this in all of our campaign to back Brad Schimmel, like why this was so important. And obviously, on the abortion front, Wisconsin had a trigger law. When Roe v. Wade was overturned under Dobbs, there was a trigger law in place in Wisconsin to immediately bring some pretty rigorous restrictions on abortion in the state. And I know, McCluskey, you could talk to those specifically, what would have gone down there. And now with the liberal leaning court, there's really no chance of those restrictions being in place. Am I right?
Right. So it unfortunately it's still basically status quo then in Wisconsin. Until I mean the scary part is that I believe we have a Supreme Court justice race for like the next 3 or 4 years in Wisconsin. So it's gonna be tough going forward, especially if the Democrats keep on winning in that state. Because while the state loved Donald Trump, they don't generally like Republicans. So they could really get a majority on the Supreme Court, and that could be a major problem,
Yeah,
a
and
larger majority.
yeah, I was talking to Mercer about this a little bit on our messaging call Monday, and he was pointing out. I know he wanted to be here to point out that the low propensity voters don't tend to turn out in these special elections. For obvious reasons, that's the definition. And in the past, Republicans have enjoyed. Have enjoyed special elections. We've done better, but now as the demographics have shifted, in these special elections, what we'll probably see when everything is parsed, what happened yesterday in Wisconsin, is that most of the voters who come out tend to be older, so 65 plus. They tend to come out, and also the sort of like fringe radical agenda people, like on the left, who will come out now. So college educated suburbans, and the reality is that those demographics who tend to vote in special elections are now to the left. And so Republicans have the disadvantage when it comes to these off year elections.
Yeah, Wisconsin's such an interesting state. Go ahead, Tom. Sorry to
Well,
interrupt.
to counter the oracle from the ice castle, since he isn't on right now,
Yep.
so he's not able to rebut. In Florida, we kind of saw, because if you read Politico or anything like that, which I do, they're saying about how this is a loss for Trump, even though the two Republicans won in Florida because they didn't win by the same margins that Donald Trump won. But what you have to look at is the past congressional elections, which were not special elections. And like take the case of the Waltz district with Randy Fine. Randy Fine he was a horrible candidate. I'm not expecting like him to light things up here in Washington D.C. If you're listening, Randy, call me. But he won the district more than Tim Waltz did in the last election. So it's
Wait, are you talking about?
everybody's going to say
Sorry, not
the
Tim
Florida
Waltz.
special election.
Not Tim
Not Tim
Waltz.
Waltz.
No,
I'm
Mike
sorry.
Mike Waltz. Yeah.
Mike Waltz.
Of
Sorry
Signal
about that.
fame.
Signal Mike. Yeah.
Signal Mike, yeah.
Randy Fine could probably beat Tim Waltz as well.
Thank God.
So it's while Republicans should be worried and prepared for something like this, I'm not as I think the Democrats are blowing a lot of smoke where there's not a lot of fire.
Yeah, I mean they kind of have
Good to
to,
hear.
but one thing on Wisconsin that was interesting to me, there was also this constitutional amendment question. I believe it was just a straight up ballot referendum, and it passed with very strong support. It's about voter ID. So requiring a photo ID for voting is now enshrined in the Wisconsin Constitution, making it much harder for Congress, say, to pass something to take it out. We actually saw very similar abortion enshrinement initiatives across the country. So, like Wisconsin went for Trump, I think by less than 1%. In this past election. I think in 2016 also very narrow margin, but it's historically very purple as of the last, 10,
Right.
20 years. And I think, I wonder, someone brought this up in the chat too. I think about this, like Elon Musk, obviously very public about, handing out $1 million checks, doing events there. And I do appreciate that enthusiasm. Did it almost backfire in the way that it inspired more Democrats to come out because they just see it as this very public, I'm in front. We got to stop this billionaire. Obviously then rallying up the base about that. Or was it kind of inevitable anyway? Was Wisconsin really just going to end up voting for Crawford?
Both could be right. You didn't see George Soros or Pritzker, Governor Pritzker, holding rallies and trumpeting like, this is what I'm doing. Elon Musk has been making himself a target, which is good when he's doing Doge stuff, but when he's interfering not interfering, when he's contributing to a state elections, um, it's not that helpful, because then it's an
read the
outside
room.
factor, and it takes away the concentration away from the candidate and puts it on to a different person.
Yeah, agreed there. Another consequence of this election, too, in terms of Wisconsin and moving blue, purple, red, which way is it going, is that with the liberal majority maintained on the Supreme Court, we are probably going to see those redistrictings that are in favor of Democrats be maintained. So basically, there was a more Republican-friendly way of districting and drawing the lines for voting for representatives to go to the U.S. Congress, to go to the House of Representatives. And those were overturned a couple of years ago. I think, was it the beginning of the Biden administration, Tom? How long those redistrictings have been in place. And there was an effort to go back to the original districting lines in Wisconsin. That's pretty much dead in the water now, with Susan Crawford being on the bench.
And just a reminder, redistricting would be redrawing the election maps to be more friendly to Democratic candidates versus Republicans. I believe the last time they did it, they picked up 2 Democrat seats because of the redistricting. And the Supreme Court has the final say as to whether or not it stays.
Right.
Supreme Court.
So not great. We'll see what happens. Florida was encouraging. I think, again, you were saying they were blowing smoke where it wasn't, even though there weren't great Republican candidates. So kind of a mixed bag, I'd say, on that. But one thing that I did want to touch for our next story here is we've covered some of the specific stories when it comes to deportation, immigration, what the American people think about it. So the New York Post actually had an exclusive straight from the Department of Homeland Security. And I would say personally pretty encouraged about how they've been, in terms of raw numbers, how they've been carrying out what the American people asked for. So the Trump administration has arrested 113 migrants, deported over 100,000 since taking office. And so
113,000 for the audio, 113,000 migrants.
Right. And so to put this in perspective with some other stats, in March, there was barely 7,000 illegal border crossings. For perspective, last year in March, there was 137,000.
That's incredible.
It's hard to even, I think that's a 95% decrease.
Yeah.
Notably, the big attack line from Democrats was we need a bill, we need congressional action. Otherwise, it's completely impossible to do so. Trump has over and over again proven that was false. We just needed a new president, was his line. And so for context, over the 4-year span, there was an average of 250,000 border encounters every month. And so if these numbers hold, we'll be looking at the lowest number of encounters since 1968. Was that the same year as the Reagan Amnesty Act?
Ooh,
1968?
Yeah.
You said? Or 1988?
1988.
Right. Sorry. What was the first
Pogo wasn't born, so you got to excuse him.
You got to excuse me on that. But didn't we start mass amnesty in like the 60s, or would that have been in the 80s?
It was in the 60s. I'm going to get the date.
It was in the 60s, and except Republicans became more compliant with it. I think in the 80s, we kept on striking the devil's bargain with the Democrats, and also some pretty liberal Republicans that, okay, secure the border and allow a pathway to citizenship. And what would happen was we would allow a pathway to citizenship, and we wouldn't secure the border. And that happened under Reagan. It happened under both Bushes. And that's why on the immigration issue for the longest time, until Donald Trump came along, people didn't trust either party to solve the problem.
Right. And that's why you get like this, even like the current immigration law is this weird kind of packaging of slapstick different laws that are tangentially related. And that's why everyone says it's a mess, because rightfully so, there isn't really a coherent policy that we've operated by for a long time.
You can name anything the federal government has got involved in, be it healthcare, be it trade, be it anything else, and you will get the same result, that it's the same maze of different laws, and they just don't understand what
I
some of
call
it
it
does.
American Byzantium because it really is like a Byzantine city of all of this stuff. And I think what you're referring to in the 1960s, Pogo, is the Immigration and Naturalization Act, where we started doing things like, okay, we have this quota of that we're going to, as a part of the civil rights, broader like global civil rights efforts. So we have this quota based on representation that every nation's going to get. They can send this many people in every year. And it's really interesting that the last time our illegal numbers were this low was about the same time during the Johnson administration that we started to increase these quotas per nation legally as well. So it's just been a lot of interesting correlation, and really would be cool to dig into causation there.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
I looked into like the public response to all of this, because what I've been seeing in the Atlantic had a story on this, is they're pinpointing, the individual complex sob stories and just blowing that up. And I saw that being the big debate. JD Vance weighed in on it on Twitter, but then I'm looking at the broader picture in terms of raw numbers, and no surprise to me, they came out at the same time. I'll address the Atlantic thing in a bit, but 59% are currently approving of Donald Trump's handling of his promise to remove people here illegally in the country. 59%. That number's in the high 90s for Republicans, but even close to a majority of Democrats agree with that as well. So maybe what's interesting, Tom, and you said most of the things the federal government have been involved in are the slapstick and not coherent. This doesn't seem, not correlated to me, that the president running on a campaign promise of shutting down the border and actually accomplishing it truly in historic fashion. I mean, we're talking since the 60s in terms of border encounters. Seems like promises made, promises kept. Have to give him credit for that.
Without a doubt. And it's not like I'm holding back any credit to the guy.
Yeah.
And I think Josh has pointed this out in the past, because of course I'm a faithful listener to the LOOPcast as well as sometimes guest, is that he's tackling the 70-80% issues. And if he keeps on, and those, he's tackling other issues, but those are the ones he's really promoting and talking about. The trans women, men and women sports and things along those lines. If he keeps on doing that, I think we have a good chance to win the general election, and maybe we will see that Donald Trump third term.
He has been trolling that so hard. It's hilarious to watch people's brains explode. The View had like a whole segment on the threat of Trump third term. They're just like wasting so much time. I'm like, he's trolling you, right?
It's
like we do have the 22nd Amendment, but they're just like, can you believe it?
But to be fair, we have 15 years before Barron is 35.
Oh, I know.
Somebody's got to
what will we do in the interim?
Yeah. Right. Dude, this is so funny. A reporter asked him about it, and they're like, well, if you do that, then they could run Obama against you. And he's like, I'd love to face Obama.
He's like, that would be great. I would enjoy that.
I would love that. I also, another thing in this report too, I want to give a ton of credit on is fentanyl. So last February, you're looking at about 2,000 pounds of fent every month at the southern border. I mean, 2,000 pounds, like this much fentanyl could kill an entire room in a sauna, basically, which is just crazy. So this February, we're looking at 590 pounds. So directly from the White House, their explanation, I think, makes a lot of sense, because they're not encountering an overwhelming amount of people at the border. They are agents that, sure, they sent more agents and they allow them to actually do their jobs now in terms of ICE. But they actually have time to look into this, to vet, to actually get people at the border. Pair that with the designation of the cartel as a terrorist group, now authorizing the threat of military force against them. I think in a lot of ways, this just becomes a business decision. The Morning Wire had a great segment on this, but they're talking to the DEA guy, and he's like, look, it's a business decision. If people think they're going to get caught at the border, if people think they're going to get shot at, they're just going to ship this fentanyl elsewhere. It's not worth the risk. And I think it always has been a business decision, which is kind of shocking that there's been so much inaction and promulgation of a system. That
is it shocking, Pogo? Is it shocking?
It is to people that have logic and rational thought. I mean, and then also for the people kind of like parroting this open borders policy as somehow like a Catholic good, as a Christian good of welcoming the stranger, which just promulgated a system of sex trafficking, death, fentanyl, and lawlessness and disorder in our own country that now the Trump administration has to go clean up the mess left and do something about the fact that there's millions and millions of unvetted people in our country, dangerous or not. We don't know who they are. There's no accountability to the law either. We have sanctuary cities, just letting them run around. So sorry, I could rant and rant and rant. It makes no sense if you give it any modicum of thought. But,
And
really happy to
especially
see this improvement.
I mean, a lot of people that we ally on other issues, including within the Catholic Church, are the ones who are propagating and who are now trying to stop Donald Trump from what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
And not taking any responsibility for all the problems that have been happening in the United States just in 4 years' time. How all those things that you mentioned, fentanyl abuse and trafficking and other drug abuses have just gone up in just that 4 year time. Fentanyl use, I do believe it started going down, but I think a lot of it is because the people who are more likely to use it are dead.
Yeah.
So right now, though, I expect it to plummet because fentanyl will be very hard to find.
Cut off the source. Let's do it.
Okay. Basically, for the Atlantic piece.
Oh boy.
I'm going to cover this quickly because it was debated yesterday. I do think it's a massive distraction, but it's a good lesson in media framing. And I've fallen for it myself from time to time. So this headline came out. It was all over Twitter. Got picked up by a lot of left-wing accounts. An administrative error sends a Maryland father to a Salvadorian prison.
That sounds bad. That sounds really bad.
I believe that was the intended purpose. The Trump administration says it has mistakenly deported an immigrant with protected status, but that courts are powerless for them to return. Just, mega viral on Twitter yesterday. If you want to go into the story, the way that they're framing it is a goon squad picked up this random father in Maryland and then sent him to El Salvador.
He was here legally, protected legal status.
Right. That's what they said.
That was what they reported.
That was what they reported.
Technically, nothing in the Atlantic report was false, but they just happened to leave out.
No, actually, I think the protected legal status is false. That actually was not true, according to court documents.
Right. There's still some ways that lawyers can argue that it is. So they could find someone who would make the case legally that he had protected status if you interpreted the immigration judge's ruling from 6 years ago a certain way. However, you're right. He had in fact been identified by this immigration judge 6 years ago as being a active member of the MS-13 gang and a flight risk, and he should not be allowed to move freely about the United States, which was conveniently left out of the Atlantic's report. That paragon of journalistic integrity that they are.
Right. Yeah. Of signal leak fame.
Yeah.
I'm kind of shocked. I'm on a couple of single chats with those guys over at the Atlantic.
Really? Did Goldberg show up and you're morning tea? Yeah.
Yeah. I want to
DM, who's that?
He's everywhere.
I want to be very specific for people that maybe hear this story and want something to say about it. This centers around this guy named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is an El Salvadorian national. He was in the country illegally. So Will Chamberlain, who I actually interviewed recently, had a great thread on this, but he came to the country illegally in 2012. He was arrested in 2019 in a Home Depot parking lot. And so at that point he was arrested. He was found to be native and citizen of El Salvador. And at that point, it was basically he last second tried to apply for asylum. That actually wasn't what came up first. They didn't even know he was in MS-13 at the time. They just brought him in front of a judge and said, he's in the country illegally. We need to deport him. 2019. So he was scheduled for deportation. He appealed that. At that point, they found out, and a federal judge found that he had ties to MS-13, that he was in an MS-13 gang. At that point, they denied his bond because his flight risk. He had a history of not showing up to stuff. He appealed that again, and they dismissed the appeal. So 6 months later, he emerges with the tactic, hey, I'm going to apply for asylum. I'm going to apply for withholding from removal to El Salvador. And number 3, protection under Article 3 of the Convention Against Torture. Basically, 6 months later, because he'd been in the country since 2012, you actually can't apply for asylum after being here you have to do it within the first year.
Past the deadline, correct.
So this is him working with an immigration lawyer to stay here. He has a fiance in the country. She's pregnant. He's got 2 brothers with green cards. He really wants to stay in the country.
Yeah.
So if you just understand the facts of this.
He has a child who was born here. His brother's with green cards, which goes back to that 1965 Immigration Act, which did away with the quotas and said, if you have family here, you stay. So yeah, he is trying everything he can to stay here, and says he fears to return to El Salvador for his life.
Said he feared to return to El Salvador, said that his family had a pupusa business and that the MS-13 gang was extorting them, and that he feared for his life because of that. But his asylum claim was denied. The only thing that was affirmed at the time in 2019 was that he can't be returned to El Salvador. So he did not have legal status in the United States ever at any point, because his asylum was declined, because he did it, 8 years after, 6 years, whatever, after he came to the country. And I think it actually kind of goes back to this. So one, his circumstances absolutely could have changed, because Nayib Bukele has crushed this gang in El Salvador by all available metrics, and like they're all in jail right now. So he should be safe to go back. But this is kind of the point, I think, about abuse of the system, and about doing this intentionally to it's bizarre to me to watch half the country potentially defend MS-13 gang members. But if you come to the country and now you're just working with immigration lawyers, kind of going back to subverting the system to come up with strategies to try to stay in the country, like that is an abuse of the system. You've been here legally for all of these years. Put the gang ties aside. Like, this is not how a well-oiled system should operate. So I basically have no sympathy. Yes, they claimed, the administration said there was an administration error. I understand that. But he is an El Salvadorian national, and he's been proven by a couple of judges now to have MS-13 ties. So, this to me is a massive distraction.
It is a massive distraction. And I think what it shows yet again that what the left-wing propaganda machine is going to try and do is they're going to try and target the Trump administration on its sort of marquee accomplishments. So what are some of the things Trump ran on, right? So obviously the men and women's sports thing, they can't, 80% of the country is against left-wing propaganda on this. So they have to let that go. Last week it was national security and not getting involved in foreign wars. Out comes the signal thing, right? So Trump campaigning on getting us out of foreign wars, signal, right? That piece is driving at that. Now we have his massively popular immigration. So they're going to try and find anything they can. And the details don't matter. They can make a headline out of this. There was an administrative error. There was some kind of paperwork mess up on the airplane, etc. But they're going to take the sob story and say, oh my gosh, we can make a headline out of this. Father of a 5-year-old with disabilities, married to an American woman, is put in this horrible prison, the worst prison in the world, I think the way they put it. And he can't get back. And people picked up on this. I mean, people who I respect on X, on other social media, they pick up on this and they're like, this is horrible. This is absolutely an outrage. And the details don't matter. The headline matters. And that's what The Atlantic is going to continue to do. Next week, who knows? Pick your topic. What's another popular Trump topic? And they'll come up with something.
And this formula isn't new. It goes back to the Biden administration. What is kind of new is it seems like The Atlantic seems to be the only rag that wants to really propagate it. And also we have a different media presence, those of us on the right. But take even the Russian memo about Donald Trump. It first appeared in leftist sites and in an Atlantic type paper or whatever it's called.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden the mainstream media starts reporting on that. Well, not reporting on different story, but Hunter Biden laptop. So the mainstream media, who a lot of people still read and still rely on, and in the news, who just have. I'll be honest, I only saw the headlines. It wasn't until you two started telling me all the facts about what's going on. And I work with people in the Immigration Accountability Project, great group of people. I'd not heard the story yet, the full background story. So if I'm not hearing it, I'm in the middle of things. The rest of America isn't hearing anything.
Yeah.
I'm not in the middle of MS-13. They kicked me out years ago. But.
Thanks for saying that, because that's the reason I even felt like it was necessary to bring it up, because I will say, as we've covered on the podcast, we're covering debates that are happening on Twitter quickly, and maybe they last, maybe they don't. But for basically the service that I'm wishing to provide by addressing those isn't to amplify I see them as like media ops, basically.
Mhm.
Like if it's coming, this is an op against the administration. This isn't an attempt at authentic journalism, because if it was, you would have mentioned the MS-13 tie. You would have mentioned the fact that he didn't apply for asylum. Like these things weren't in the article that The Atlantic put out. And then of course it gets amplified by, the left-wing operatives that are putting it on Twitter with limited context to try to hit as much as they can on the Trump administration against something that is largely popular with the American people. So what I do see as like, this is where I think all of this is failing. Even I see this as the smart route. If I'm the other side, this is exactly what I try to do. I just think because the landscape has evolved now, that the Trump administration has done such a good job communicating with the American people what they want to do, making sure it's popular with them, getting the popular support, and then basically putting your head down and moving forward. Like JD Vance put this up. He was actually arguing with a few people on Twitter. He said, Joe Biden sanctioned an invasion of the United States. We have approximately 20 million illegal aliens in this country. Their victims are measured in longer wait times for hospitals, overwhelmed schools, and murder victims the media largely ignored. The media has determined the real victims are the gang members we're trying to get out of the country. And I do think that's the end point. It's like the only way that this ends up being successful is if this permeates so broadly that it changes the American people's support on this issue that they abandon it. And I have not seen enough or anything effective, nearly effective enough to lose that popular support that we're seeing, especially from Republicans, but even from Democrats. Majority of the country here, like you said, 80-20 issues. So I don't see any way. And I feel like so much is happening at one time. There's not enough time for them to even have a unified force on one specific thing. They have like 3-4 things that they need to address. And good luck. I mean, it's happening so fast. Look at what's going on at HHS, which I want to get into next. But
it comes back at us too, though, because we don't have enough time sometimes to defend. So
Sure.
then we have to move on as well. And the narrative that people think about in 6 months later is, oh, but what about that innocent guy who was shipped back to El Salvador? And it's a telephone game because it'll grow as well. It's like he was a Canadian citizen and he got shipped to El Salvador because they thought he was part of the Sesame Street gang. And of course, everybody
It's
will
true.
just
That will,
like to say it.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
It's a rough
I
game.
don't envy the job
One
of the
guy
Trump
lives in a
administration.
trash can. But it also members of Congress need to speak out more. I mean, I face this all the time on the life and family issues that you and I and well, especially Erica, because she does a lot of media, we can go on the Daily Caller and the Daily Wire and in our friendlies and things like that, and even Fox News. Back when I had long blonde curly locks.
Whoa,
Uh,
now.
However, members of Congress, when they talk about an issue, all of a sudden all the local news starts reporting about it and stuff like that. Members of Congress need to speak out more too, both defending the president's policies as well as backing it up.
Yeah, except my members of Congress, they can just go.
They can be quiet.
Enjoy a martini by the docks,
Yeah.
because I don't need to hear from Chris Murphy anymore.
Chris Murphy looks like he needs one, man. He's looking a little manic these days.
A vacation, like a long one. Just go to the beach, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, isn't today Libation Day?
Libation
Day? Libation Day or Liberation Day.
Happy Liberation Day. Yeah. Speaking of getting some information out to the public, I am looking forward to more information on tariffs.
Yeah.
And what exactly is going to happen. But
Coming
we'll
soon.
probably have that Friday.
All right. Erica, we got some Planned Parenthood cuts.
Great.
Tom, I think you actually sent this our way.
Yeah, you did. This is why I voted. This is top story. I'll just give you the rundown. The Trump administration is withholding tens of millions in funding from Planned Parenthood affiliates over alleged civil rights violation and promotion of DEI and illegal immigration status. Look, we've gone over this. I wish Planned Parenthood was getting the screws because they're trafficking in fetal baby parts and they're chopping breasts off of healthy 16-year-olds and promoting all of that horrible stuff. However, if we can get them on the DEI, so be it. This is great. Department of Health and Human Services says 16 providers, including 9 Planned Parenthood branches, I believe the one in Connecticut is one of them, must prove compliance within 10 days or risk losing their grants. And this is a win, right? Just a little bit of context. According to Kristen Hawkins' group, $2 million a day, $2 million taxpayer dollars a day are going to Planned Parenthood if you break it all down nationally. It's basically a far left scheme to thwart the will of the American people. Not only are they killing 1,000 babies every day, Planned Parenthood shovels that money right back into the PACs that elect people like Joe Biden. So it's just a crazy scheme, not even beyond the abortion, and they need to be defunded like 20 years ago. So very excited for this development. I hope it actually happens.
I actually spoke with Kristen at a Students for Life press conference last Thursday. They put on some great events, and it was attached to an SBA Pro-Life America event, a lobby day where they had like 300 people come in and to lobby Congress on an effort to defund Planned Parenthood. And I hate to use the dead name. I mean, abortion giant Planned Parenthood. Because one thing I've been trying to defund Planned Parenthood even way back, probably like I think I tried to write my first paper on it in like 1998 or 99.
Oh my goodness.
The year
I was in
born.
ninth grade.
Right. And every time, thank you guys. And every time,
Oh
it
no,
was
I was
always
only
like-
10 that year, but no, sorry, go ahead.
it was always like we felt like we got close, or
Yeah.
we were getting close. We have never been this close. One thing they're trying to do right now is to fund it through the reconciliation process, where you only need 51 votes in the Senate. When we first tried to do this in 2013, it was a young woman who came up with the idea, staffer for Representative Chris Smith, who said, all the other Republicans want to repeal Obamacare, so do we. However, how about we also defund Planned Parenthood at the same time? It went through all the traps, and we had to fight Republicans to get it into the bill. Flash forward to 2017, and we had to fight leadership, Republican leadership, and we had to fight also the White House at the time as well, of course. But we still got it in. This time around, leadership, the White House, everybody is on board. We have to defund this agency. And my points at the press conferences, I did the 3Ds. The 3Ds are defund, which we're trying to do right now through reconciliation, which the president is also doing through this DEI initiative. And I'm hoping it's the place in Connecticut. Talk to a good friend of mine at HHS. One of the affiliates that's being defunded have separate break rooms for Black people and for white people. Yes.
Oh
So
my
if that
gosh.
sounds familiar to anybody who's familiar with history
Yeah.
or Jim Crow laws, and this is liberal abortion giant Planned Parenthood doing this. So defund, debar is something there's a process in the federal government. Say that you're doing business with a nefarious organization, and I'd say an organization that traffics in baby body parts, covers up human trafficking, covers up statutory rape, defrauds the government in Medicare and Medicaid. That is an organization the government shouldn't be doing business with. There's a government
Sounds like
process where you can stop them from getting any federal government money. You can do it. It's one shot, and you get it. No HHS money, no Department of Education money, no Department of Labor money. And the third one is dismantle. And by dismantle, I mean an organization like this should not exist. It should not have a C3 status where it's a nonprofit. That should be taken away from it, because the only thing they do is kill babies. And now they're expanding into the territory of, if your baby lives, we want to sterilize them through transing a couple of years later. So defund, debar, and dismantle was my message. And we have the best chance in the 30 years I've been trying to do this, before the two of you were born, to do this now.
Sounds
Praise
good to me.
God. Praise God. And keep
Awesome.
the prayers coming. We're in the middle of 40 days for life right now. I believe the halfway mark was yesterday. Maybe it was the day before. And so those of you who participate in that, this is a spiritual battle as well as political. So make sure that your local 40 days you are supporting right now, because like Tom said, we're on the cusp of some great successes here.
Great. Erica, if you could just give us a wrap up of what happened over Kansas. We were going to talk about it Monday. We pushed it to today, but I think the people like to know. How did it all go?
Yeah, this was another case of media framing, right? So any of you who looked up the Kansas rally so this was at the Kansas State House. This is the Satanic Grotto threatening to do a quote unquote black mass. It was probably more of a sacrilegious ritual. We were still pretty sure they did not have a consecrated host. Praise God. CNN frames the story as maybe 100 Catholics showed up to protest the satanic black mass. And of course, they frame it as a free speech issue, chaos, and 4 arrests. So this is the CNN framing. In fact, to set the record straight, according to our own Logan Church and Tommy Valentine, part of our advocacy team, directors of political advocacy for Catholic Vote, they were on the ground. We were looking at over 2,000 Catholics and Christians showed up, not to just protest, but to actually pray and to make reparations for the offenses against the Sacred Heart of Jesus and against the Eucharist that took place. The arrests were all on Satanists who were throwing hook punches pretty fiercely in the Capitol Rotunda and otherwise disrupting the civic peace. But it was an amazing event. We've got a little recap video over on the Catholic Vote YouTube channel, which was very beautiful, put together by our own Simon. And again, it's a matter of framing. So make sure that the media you're listening to is trustworthy. It was a great day. So thank you to everyone who prayed for that, who donated, helped us get the signs out, helped us get the word out. And it was a great success in that sense. And maybe some hearts were converted, which is the point of the whole thing.
Yeah, I had some people email in that either were there or kind of similar. They're like, I saw how this was covered. It wasn't how it worked at all. They said like the 4 churches around, and in the video I just shared it in the chat, but 4 churches around were packed.
Yeah.
Like, so it wasn't
Capacity
just, there's 4 different sides of the Capitol. Yes, there's some people at each side, and yes, there's shenanigans going inside, but there's a huge prayerful presence at all of the major churches in the area, which is incredible.
Right, which is the point.
Love wins. Kansas is so wonderfully represented by Archbishop Naumann.
Yes.
It's just fantastic leader. Just turned 75, and I'm hoping his automatic resignation letter is lost.
Yeah.
Mail, because
in the ocean.
He has a number of years ahead. I shouldn't tell this story, but hopefully my wife doesn't listen. Sometimes my wife will drive him around whenever he visits DC, and I can always tell, because then when I get in the car, because he's a very tall man, all of a sudden I'm like way back, like, okay. Does there happen to be a Kansas Archbishop in the car today?
Yeah. Also Benedictine College out there too. A ton of students ended up showing. Shout out to Stephen Minnis, the president.
Yeah.
Wonderful Catholic college in Kansas.
Yeah, we had one student. We had actually 2 students. So Hannah Heister, who writes for our news agency, she did the story. And then Rosie Wolfgang was another student. She wrote a story for us, just a first person, a student's perspective. She said that as a child of political activists, shout out to Peter Wolfgang and his good wife, Leslie. As a child of activists, she's been to many rallies and many protests in her life since she was in diapers, I believe the line was. And she said this was by far one of the most moving. So it's a good read. Go check it out on our website for sure. Thank you, Rosie.
When Rosie was about 9 or 10, she was selling cookies and things like that to raise money to buy diapers and stuff for local pregnancy care center. And I was at the March for Life, and I was able with Jeannie Mancini to give her like a nice little award just to thank her for that. Just knowing that she's most likely going to overshadow anything that I or Peter has ever done.
Hopefully she will live to see Planned Parenthood utterly dismantled, debarred, and defunded.
Okay, so basically we're going to have to make a chop choice here based on time.
Oh, boy.
Should we save the death penalty for Josh?
Yes, we have to save the death penalty for Josh. Mercer, we're thinking of you. We're waiting for you.
Always thinking of Josh.
I wish I was on it with him, because I think we have different views on the death penalty.
Oh, dang. Okay,
I'm prepared to push back. I'm prepared to push back on Mercer, so I'll do my best, McCluskey. Give me your talking points. We'll take care of it Friday.
I just more or less see the death. I'm not offended by people who support the death penalty. I don't think the Catholic Church has ruled definitively on it. So I think it's wrong to say that it's within Catholic teaching that you always have to oppose the death penalty. But I think as a society, we've come to a place where is it really moral to kill someone because they killed someone when we have the resources to keep them? Because what I normally hear is, do you know how expensive it is if we keep these people alive? And that's not really a reason to not keep somebody alive, is because of how expensive it is.
Yeah, I think that's
that, but I'm going to censor
everybody, including people up for the death penalty, the most horrible people in the world, have a chance at redemption, and we are taking it away from them as a government if we kill them.
All right,
Yeah.
Thomas Aquinas disagrees.
Right. That's that.
And
But what he
also-
brought up, the money argument, is the wrong argument, in my opinion, because that's no different than like keeping someone on like plugged in, basically, of like, oh, well, if you euthanize your grandparents, then it's cheaper. So that's why I'm always hesitant when the correct argument to me is more of a philosophical, moral argument for, are they a danger then to the people around them? Are they at a danger to themselves to commit even worse sins? So yeah, we'll say I committed the cardinal sin by bringing this up, and then we're going to talk about it before Josh gets on. Tom, thank you for your contribution. Let's talk about the kids real quick. Okay.
Okay.
So I came across this podcast, and shout out, not many, I feel like probably like most people, you don't watch too many new podcasts. But this guy, ND Wilson, over with Stories Are Soul Food, episode 180, Why the Boys Aren't Reading, really caught my eye. I believe he's with Canon Press, which is cool. But basically, he was sitting down with this other guy, and he's written some really successful adult fiction books, or young adult fiction books. And he's also accomplished in the film world. I believe he's had a few things done by Netflix. And so he has kind of the unique perspective of looking at the world, both from a publishing perspective and also the movie industry, TV industry perspective. And he, in this episode, is relaying what he has heard now from both publishers and now, surprising to him, the TV world, that young men, young boys specifically, not only are they not reading anymore, they're not watching TV anymore. They're not watching movies anymore. Nothing made recently they're watching. And you can see all this now with all streamer statistics, which I thought was pretty interesting. And in the episode, they even were like, okay, go take a look at the top 10 for young adult on Goodreads. And it's of no surprise to me that Sunrise of the Reaping, Oathbound, Cruel is the Light, First Love Language, For No Mortal Creature, The Floating World, none of this is really appealing to young men's. Rebel Witch. So basically the argument is there's nothing written for young men anymore. Currently, and the things that young men are gravitated towards have been written a long time ago. And same trend has kind of occurred in movies, but I really liked, I cut out a few actually. I think this kind of was indicative of the larger problem, but this is a great clip from the show.
Yeah. We need more of holes. We need more of these books that will hit boys like this. So I'm asking them for their editorial suggestions. And with Lee Pike Ridge, there's this very, very intelligent publisher editor at a major house. And she's telling me that she really wants this and she loves that this is going to resonate with boys and it's so great and yada, yada, yada. And then she says, so can we take out the treasure and the guy, the man, the father figure that the boy finds? And could we just make the story about the love between a mother and her son?
Are you serious?
And I was like, no.
No.
So no, this father hunger is the thing. This is the thing that resonates. This is boys striving to rise up and be worthy and surpass their fathers. Like this drive. Could I take out the gold? The crazy man in the caves, Reg, who becomes this father figure, and even the whole issue of his dad, and just focus on, this relationship between mom and son. And it's like, yeah, one could do that.
Yeah.
If you were writing a book for moms, but not for sons.
Yeah. So that was such a telling exchange of the whole interview. That was, for me, like the encapsulating moment. And I think that he makes the point that when you're talking to publishers like that about stories, and he makes this point as well, talking about where book awards are going, right? So book awards are going, his novel that was working with young men was up for an award. And one of the awardees, or the warders, said to him, we wanted to give it to you, but this just isn't the message that we want to be sending. And all of the top awards the last few years for children's and young adult fiction have gone to graphic novels that primarily appeal to females. And publishers, like the woman he was recounting this conversation with, they know that the people to whom they're selling books now are predominantly female and predominantly older females. And so there's this sort of rock and a hard place. Like they want stories, they want to get back the boy audience, but the reality on the ground is the battle's already, like the war's already been lost in a way, right? The ground has been surrendered. And so they're not going to fund the literature that could possibly draw these kids back. And it was a pretty dark interview. I mean, he ends up saying, Andy Wilson, I don't know the answer. I don't know what you do about this. Because the piece about the movies and not watching sustained narratives, even in film form, that's scary to me. And his interviewer says, well, what are they doing? And he's like, well, they're doom scrolling, right? That's about all they have the attention span for.
Doom scrolling and porn.
Right. What did he say? He was like, the one cultural commonality that young people can go anywhere in the country. You can go to public school kids. You can go to kids being raised in these smaller communities. The one thing they have in common culturally is The Office, because it's 20-minute episodes and it's a story, quote unquote. It's not a story that you can digest in between doom scrolling and not have FOMO. It's so scary. Like,
well, and it was before kind of like the wokeopolis of like, he said you can't do diversity day anymore. Precisely because of why people find it funny. And it was so interesting watching him go through. He said, he's been having these conversations for 20 years. He's written hit books for young men that, and every publisher he talked to and the studios they talk to are chasing this demographic. They're like, we know young men are reading this. We need them. They're not coming back. We need them. But they're like not will. It's almost like they're so married to the message, quote unquote, that, we want young men, but we want them in the way that we want them, not being open to what actually appeals to young men. And I think probably because at least how culture's developed over time and the people that are in charge of these decisions kind of despise young men, like what makes men. They actually consider it toxic masculinity or whatever, like things that actually do appeal and would bring them in. They're just unwilling to write because they find something wrong with it fundamentally.
I think historically, though, young men, reading is not at the forefront of our minds. I don't care what generation you're talking about. One of my favorite books growing up was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. This is a guy who has all these adventures because he doesn't want to go to school. He doesn't want to read. And for me, I can remember I hated swim practice. So I stopped going to swim practice. I always woke up early. I'm 6 of 8 children. So early was the time my mother actually had a break and could get things ready for the day. And she just turned to my father, or first she turned to me and said, no, you're not going to be watching TV or something like, or getting underfoot. And she brought me up to the attic and there was a series of books called The Hardy Boys.
Come on.
I loved it, and then I started reading on my own, like Doc Savage and Tarzan and things like that. But I had to be forced into it. I had to be forced into it. Like, okay, if you're not going to go outside, you're not going to go to swim practice. This is your only choice. Sometimes I think that's what a parent or a teacher might have to do.
He does acknowledge that young men are notoriously picky about what they do consume, but once they do get hooked, it's like, they can't get enough.
Right. And I mean, anecdotally, that's the case. That was the case with our son. And if he had been in a traditional school setting, he would have been labeled a late reader. But what we found was really what we were waiting for was to find the hook, right? What's the book that's going to get him in? And we did. We had to force him to sit down and painfully sound out every word in Hardy Boys chapters until he realized at the end of the chapter, wait a minute, mom's not going to read to me what happens next. And they always end with a cliffhanger. And so then it's like, well, I guess I have to make myself read this. And so it is like, I think with the boys, there is a need to be more firm and really early on. And like, this is what you're going to do. You are going to sit down and read these long things and you are going to narrate them back to me. And it does take a lot of attentiveness on the parent's part. There's exceptions, obviously, to the rule. There are boys who take to it naturally. But in general, when you put the effort in, and you withhold the other options, the easy options, right? I think that this is another reason we talk a lot about how the cell phone revolution has affected young girls and the anxiety and the depression that comes with social media for young girls. But we don't talk about how for boys, if you hand them a smartphone when they're 8 or 10 versus a Hardy Boys book, of course they're going to go with the smartphone because it's candy. It's the easy thing. It's not the spinach and the vegetables. But if you just say, no, phones aren't an option, screens aren't an option, here's your book.
Well,
it's a better way to live. And
after this,
forcing me to, go ahead.
I was just going to, after this interview, like, I agree with you, Erica. That's one part of the problem from the parent perspective. But at the same time, I'm like, it's almost not the kid's fault in some ways.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's not.
Especially for young men, like nothing is being written for them or produced for them currently. That's an unusual trend.
But okay, I'm going to push back on that though.
Okay.
There is such a wealth of historical fiction literature. There is such a wealth of classic literature already in existence. And yeah, do we wish there was contemporary stuff being written for these guys? There is a little bit. I mean, I can name, Ranger's Apprentice. I can we get the oh my goodness, my brain is, anyway, there are things, we need more. But that being said, if you just go look at the reading lists for programs like Mother of Divine Grace, which is classical homeschooling curriculum, if you go look at the book list for Colby or Memoria Press, that's enough to keep a young man in books till he's 18, 19,
Can I make a
20.
distinction of this conversation? Because he makes this too, and I think it's important. We're talking about like the 1% homeschool classical communities. We're not talking about like capital C culture of the country. And what like Hollywood ostensibly and major publishers are attempting to capture our capital C culture, like broad outside. I do think like what you're describing is the answer if you can get to it. But like we're talking about now our country's culture, our country's young men everywhere. His point then being they're falling into the phones, which of course, and I think it could also be a problem for these small homeschool communities as well if you're not careful about that.
Yes, it is absolutely.
But then like what are the consequences of nothing in the last 20 years successfully capturing the attention and conversation of our America's young men, America's sons, and what they're falling into now of basically doom scrolling and porn being the final two things you fall into? Like to me, what I'm saying, it's unsurprising is you can't, they're trying their best to make it this way and they want it to be this way, like a feminized, woke 21st century version of stories, and they want it to appeal to men, but clearly it's not working. They're all sounding the alarm bells. We need them because it doesn't correspond to reality. And so if you're not creating things that correspond to reality, nothing's going to inspire them. And what are they going to do? They're going to go through the back catalog, which maybe this is good, right? Going through the back catalog into historical works and like Lord of the Rings, great example, like captivated the young minds of my generation for sure. Partially because what's in it is good, true, and beautiful and resonates and inspires young men. But if we have, if we don't learn these lessons, and maybe they will, for the next 30 years, and we have 50 years of an absolute desert of contemporary literature and works, and men have just withdrawn from all of that, to me, I think that's a tremendous problem for a nation to overcome, for young men to overcome. And you can only go back so long. Like, when's the next generation of bright minds? And maybe we're getting to this by ripping all the DEI out and stop astroturfing stuff that isn't real, like through USAID or whatever. If we can get back to actually promoting true, good, and beautiful stories that captivate young men's minds, like that's not just an entertainment problem. That's the future leaders of the country problem. That's like people serving in the military, people serving their families, like what they're attracted to, what they find good and beautiful. Like that's all been altered. Right now, there's just zero of that, and they have to go back. I don't think they're really being influenced by what's being put out, but it's a tremendous opportunity if someone can figure it out.
100%. Well, and I think like a good example of figuring it out would be Jeremy Tate over at Classic Learning Test, and the inroads that they're making there. And we need to replace things like the College Board and the SAT, which by trickle down effect have removed so much of what's good, true, and beautiful from early childhood education, even because so early now we have the kids just focused on information, memorize the facts, teach to the test. So we have this total void. And I think the answer, Tom, is that we we do this effect for 50 years of no educate of kids who can't read, who won't read. It is devastating culturally, and there is a huge void. I mean, I tremble because the generation coming up who can't read like Moby Dick because it's too long, which it's kind of long for me too. So maybe they can't even read like Northanger Abbey.
It's a problem
right?
we all have. Yeah.
They can't read Northanger Abbey because it's too long or blah, blah, blah. Those are the same kids who probably have never read the Federalist Papers either. They can't understand the Constitution. They can't read a Supreme Court decision and like parse through that, or they can't read a scientific study and figure out what it means for itself, or if it was a good data set or not. Like they can't. That's frightening to me, that the Americans who will rebuild our culture are so part of this generation. But I do think there is light in the darkness, and we have to reach more people outside of the homeschool classical education bubble with that news that there are other options. You don't have to give your kid the phone. You can make your kid read books, etc.
Yeah. Tom, sorry I interrupted. Did you have anything else on that, or you want to go Twilight Zone?
No, I think we're pretty much covered.
Right, sounds good. Twilight Zone. Tom, I think we had the same one. History was made in your neck of the woods.
Wait, which one are we talking about?
Corey?
Oh, Corey, but no, I did not have that one. So if you want to tackle that one, or
oh man, I saw it right next to your name.
I
Sorry,
certainly have thoughts about it. But
so I saw this graphic from the Democrats. I knew that someone was on the floor looking a little unhinged, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. And so
crazed.
I see this headline from the Democrats Twitter account: longest filibuster in U.S. Senate history, with a fire emoji in this cute graphic. 24 hours and 19 minutes is like a Mr. Beast challenge or something.
Like they're proud of this.
But yeah, but I was thinking about it. I was like, wait, isn't the filibuster to stop something from getting passed? I was like, okay, let me just look into this a little deeper. Like, wow, really courageous if you use that, even though the Democrats called it a Jim Crow era symbol for so long. But, at least
Cory Booker called it a Jim Crow era.
Oh, he did. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Same guy.
He himself called it a Jim Crow era. Okay. Well, so he's filibustering. But like, I don't think he even did it right. Someone said that this speech changed the course of political history, which is like, okay, well, what was he changing? It wasn't to block anything. It was just symbolic, I think. And this is what's going to rally the Democrats. Here's a clip from it.
He blocked a couple of nomination votes. I'm sorry to interrupt Cory Booker, but I mean, come on, he's talking enough. So it really wasn't, and the last person to hold the record was also a Democrat, and it was to stop civil rights legislation. And the only way it passed was because Republicans overcame the filibuster, but that was to actually stop legislation. And there have been more noble filibusters before that and since then. But this just seemed to be a guy who wanted to speak a lot.
Yeah. I mean, he did look a little crazy. I would look a little crazy at 24 hours.
To say I will not stand for another American to lose their health care for a billionaire. I will not stand for another veteran who's dedicated to stopping the suicide of other veterans to lose their job. I won't stand for the air quality in my community to be made worse because they're letting polluters pollute more. I won't stand for the collective assaults on the Constitution by a man who even the highest judge in our land,
I mean, he put
Republican-appointed
to shame
judge,
here. This is
stop
amazing.
threatening and bullying other branches of government.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you kind of have
now
to.
they support John Roberts, who of course his leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate threatened John Roberts and other judges to the point where an assassin tried to kill a couple of Republican judges. But you go on, Corey.
Yeah,
he did. He did go on for 24 hours. I mean, I have sort of a twisted respect for just the stamina that required, but wow, just
I don't. I think it's pointless.
I'm sure we're going to over the next few days, you're going to see, especially on your favorite show, The View, you're going to see him interviewed and he'll talk about how hard it was. And it's just like in the spirit of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and all these other Abraham Lincoln. And then there's me, Cory Booker, the modest.
one, I think it was dumb. And then two, did it change the course of political history? No.
No.
And then it's hilarious to me that this is what Democrats think like a really strong response to what's going on in Trump is. Like anyone cares about this.
Yeah.
Democrats are trying with their graphic design department to make Americans care about this. I don't think anyone cares about this.
They're just like, why would anyone do that? Why would you stand up there all night just talking into the void?
Mine kind of builds into yours. So if age can go before beauty.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, McCluskey.
So, and I don't know if it comes up, Rosie, because my Twitter was not working, but there was somebody who blocked Trump's agenda yesterday from going up, from going on, except it was a Republican. It was a Republican, Representative Luna from Florida. And what she wants to do is have proxy voting for women who are, for women who have just had a baby. Normally that would sound, we'd be supportive of that, except it would also be for men and women who have had a baby, meaning like paternity type leave. One thing she neglects to mention is that this is unconstitutional. It was unconstitutional when it was done during COVID. It is not unconstitutional to have your baby on the floor, and I'm all for that. Let's remind the people on the floor, like, this is what we're fighting for, type of things, and this is what the other side wants to try to eliminate. But Representative Luna, joined by about six other Republicans, let's call them lunatics, all decided to hold up passing the SAVE Act, which would help stop illegal voting, making sure that stop also some parts of illegal immigration from illegal immigrants from voting. Instead of passing that, she held up the House floor, stopped the agenda completely. And that puts a lot of things like reconciliation all on the back burner. And I got to say, it just seems to be more to build her ego. It's not really to get good done. Speaker Johnson approached her and said, you know what? I have a special chamber right off of the House floor. We can convert that into a nursery. She said, no, that's not good enough. What's been done traditionally for bipartisan ways is that, say you have a wedding to go to, you're a member of Congress and you have a wedding to go to, you go to somebody across the aisle, a Democrat, and just say, like, you're going to vote this way, I'm going to vote this way, I need to go to my son's wedding, will you just not vote so that our vote cancels each other out? Except that is not good enough either. It is really just ridiculous. And if you start allowing members of Congress to vote remotely, what kind of Congress do we have? Then they're not going to be talking with each other. They're not going to be, it's just going to be
work from home for Congress.
Right. And that's what she's pushing for. And that's why the Democrats are supporting her, because they loved it. And you remember during COVID, some of the Zoom videos, like members of Congress in their underwear at hearings.
Yeah.
And,
they would like stand up and their boxers would show. You're like, guys, don't stand up in a Zoom meeting. Like, come on.
Can I risk being insensitive?
Go ahead.
Like, if I elect you to do a job on behalf of the American people, like, didn't we have a revolution? Didn't like brave men basically conquer this continent to build an amazing country? And why this is like the priority number 1,000,000. Like, do your job. You don't have to do that much in the grand scheme of things. You have the opportunity of a lifetime to represent Americans. And I feel like at one point we used to kind of be a serious country. Like, if you're concerned that even motherhood would prevent you from doing the job that you owe to the American people for putting you there, maybe you shouldn't be in Congress.
Yeah.
Steve King, former congressman from Iowa, he missed his son's wedding so he could vote against Obamacare. And I talked with him afterwards, and we're like, what do you do? I mean, your vote, the Democrats had enough money, it really wasn't going to affect it all that much. And he was like, members of the military don't get a choice to come home to vote, to come home for a wedding, to come home for a
birth of a child,
funeral, sometimes a birth of a child. He goes, if that's what they're willing to sacrifice, I should be willing to sacrifice the same.
100%. And just as a woman who's worked with 7 newborn infants, the accommodations that have been offered to her are are more than generous. I mean, they're more than I would expect in some corporate America companies where you would be given a lactation room to go pump. Like having childcare right off of the floor. I mean, that's amazing. And you totally can do that. But you don't change the nature of the job in order so that you can bring your baby. The nature of public
Do your
discourse and
job.
civic, like do the job, right? Like
What?
if I was
Do
a
your
lawyer,
job.
right? If I was a lawyer and I had a baby, I wouldn't be to my clients like, oh, sorry, I can't meet with you in person anymore. I can't listen to can you just we need all these accommodations. I'm going to represent you in court remotely. Like that. You don't,
No, do
you
your job.
can't do that. Do the
I
job.
sent you there to do this.
100%. And
Do
to
your
see
job.
the Democrats be like, this is so anti-family and anti-woman. And what was it? The representative from the congressman from Delaware
With their
that's
Planned
out there,
Parenthood
McBride,
pin
he's
on
like,
and their
this is
gender equality
anti-woman.
pin on.
Yeah,
sure.
unbelievable. So it just didn't hold water, and no, thumbs down.
Dumb. All right,
Go take
Erica.
care of your baby. It's a short season of life, and do your job. All
Erica,
right.
what do you got?
Well, in line with the feminization of young adult fiction, we also have Greta Gerwig. Her Netflix Narnia film is making headlines. She's going to put out what they're saying is the origin story of Narnia. It's called The Magician's Nephew, people. And it turns out she has offered the role of Aslan the Lion to Meryl Streep.
Oh my gosh.
So we are transing the lion.
I mean, this is on par with the whole progressive Christians saying that God doesn't have male pronouns or something like that. Like
Yeah,
God could be a
Aslan
she,
is
God could be.
Now,
What
I
are we
have a
doing here?
suggestion. I think that Meryl Streep would make a fantastic Jadis, who is sort of the white witch at the origin of Narnia, who comes out of the dying world, gets splashed over into the Narnia pool, and messes everything up. Meryl Streep would be great at that role. She is not Aslan. She is not the lion who is the Christ figure. Yeah, it's right up there with having, they're doing what, Jesus Christ Superstar, and they're going to cast the woman from Wicked in the role of Jesus. I mean,
getting back to the entire point, like, no, it actually is important that Aslan is a male and that
it matters.
Like a strong man and that he actually corresponds with reality. He is the Christ figure. It actually is essential to the story. It can't be changed
for
some feminist nonsense worldview that does not correspond with reality. It's actually the reason why it's compelling. You can't just change it. I'm convinced that people are just picking up the rights of these to just ruin them, to just tarnish the stories for a fun pet project in which they can just and that's why I don't even watch it anymore. It's like, why even watch? I know that what they're doing. I know how this goes. I've seen it too many times. Even look at what Amazon did to, I'm not even a Lord of the Rings guy, but Rings of Power.
Oh,
ridiculous.
To Galadriel? They turned Galadriel. Right. They turned Galadriel, the Virgin Mary figure, into this girl boss alpha female who shows everybody up and has her.
No, it actually is important that that's a male. And yes, we need to have strong men represented because it corresponds with reality, the reality that we all experience.
Feminine women. Right. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
One trope that I would love to get rid of is the gay best friend. I don't know where that started, but it's in every movie for no reason. Why do we have it? The lesbian best friend. It's always the most annoying character. They have they add nothing to the story. It's when did that start? And I like to stop
representation. It's all about representation.
I guess.
Not about the story.
I guess.
It's about the message.
Yeah, the message. Shout out Critical Drinker, legend.
Yeah, love you, Critical Drinker.
Okay, well, good show, guys. Yeah, everyone play. Just keep Josh near and dear in your heart. Lion King. He will be ready on Friday. Hopefully, we miss him dearly.
Lion King is it salary time?
No. You'll be in my heart. Have you? Or no, that was Tarzan, wasn't it?
Tarzan. Yeah, Lion King is Can You Feel the Love Tonight?
No, you'll be in my heart. Tarzan, the Phil
Tarzan.
Collins.
I think Mercer would like to be Tarzan and the Lion King. Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
We miss you, Josh.
I think all men would like to be.
We should just, no. We should race swap and gender swap Josh on this program. We should just bring in a woman. We should bring in a female Josh. See how it goes over with the audience. Hey, if you want to help out the show, subscribe here on YouTube. Thank you to our sponsors today, Charity Mobile. Oh shoot. Okay, we'll handle that after the show. And then if you want to help us out, leave a review. CatholicVote.org/champions. You can become a champion. It's the best way to help out the show. And thank you for joining. We will see you guys in the next episode. Pray for us. St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis.